One of the things that I noticed, I had 19 years in the federal parliament in Australia, and I've been out around 10 years. I'm sure the two weren't related, but the great financial crisis sort of occurred about the time I left. And I think it opened up a lot of fissures in the West. We refused to own what we'd done to ourselves and to our children. And so everyone retreated to high ground. I'm not going to pay the price for fixing up this mess. And in a sense, we all do then because we don't tackle it logically. But it does strike me that it's much harder now to have a robust debate. So I think a robust debate, a robust civil square, where there can be plenty of shouting and yelling and screaming in a sense of you like, if it's non-personal. We ought to be passionate about ideas. We ought to be prepared to have a real go on the things that we think matter and how we're going to prioritise them. The problem is when it becomes personal, and so the level of relating is you're wrong because I hate you, almost.
Yes, when you look back at the correspondence, somebody just sent me today, somebody sent me a line from Thomas Paine, the essayist at the time of the American Revolution, wrote Common Sense, a letter that he wrote to George Washington with incredibly nasty accusations. But that was actually private. It was a private correspondence. I think politics has always been personal. It's always had a nasty edge to it. I think what's different is that the nature of communication, if it's one person to one person, it's between them. Or maybe it's in the parliament or the Congress, it's a few people to a few people. But if the communication is really not, I'm not really talking to you. I don't actually care about you. I'm talking at you because 20,000 people are watching and they're going to judge me based on what I say and how I treat you. So I would never treat you with compassion because I'll be crucified for it. So I think that there's certain systemic settings that have changed. And of course, we barely mentioned it, but obviously social media really coming in since about 2009. I mean, Facebook opens up to the world in 2006, I think it is. Most people don't really have it until 2009, 2010. So this hyper-connected, the nature of communication and political communication especially, has really been transformed just in the last 8 years. And this is why one of the many reasons why things seem so dark and confusing. It's as though we're in an ecosystem, a really complex ecosystem that's been evolving over millions of years. And suddenly, God reaches down and he turns up the amount of oxygen from 20% to 80%. Let's just see what happens. And things are going haywire and all kinds of species are growing and dying. So we've had some major parameter changes to the nature of our social and political interactions just in the last 8 years. And we're still adapting to it. And again, that's one of the reasons I'm hopeful, is that however bad that is, whatever bad effects it has had, it's so recent that we don't know how we're going to adapt to it. And we probably will find some ways to adapt to it.
Well, let's come to that because you interact with young people. So I think it was Edmund Burke who said, life's a contract between the dead, the living, and the unborn. We've been the beneficiaries, people of yours and my generation. We stand on the shoulders of giants, really, who have given us so much to be thankful for in terms of our material well-being and our security, our freedoms. What are we passing on? Are we equipping, given that it's not going as well as we'd like, the next generation, A, to cope, B, to turn it around? So what's happening in our universities and for our young people?
So your quote from Burke, that is the essential conservative insight that really got me when I was learning about conservatism. Burke's insight that if a man, I forget how he puts it, but if you trade on the private stock of his own knowledge, just what little he knows is nothing compared to all that's been learned in the past. And that struck me as deeply wise and deeply true. And because people are prone to manias and following cult leaders, we're prone to running off. The Simpsons as a TV show, The Simpsons is great at catching this aspect of people. We can be incredibly stupid when you put us together in a mob. And so having some constraints based on tradition, religion, the past, generally leads to good results. Revolutions that are truly revolutionary, throwing off the past, I think they have a perfect record of being complete disasters. I'm not sure, but I would certainly, I'm with Thomas Sowell, I'm contrasting the American Revolution, the French Revolution, and saying a more balanced philosophy versus a more radical throw out the past, rename the months, redo the calendar, change the family. That's a really, really bad idea. So your quote from Burke about how it's a contract between these generations, yeah, my guess is not as much now. It's not seen as much by young people as that. There is a tendency now to judge people by what's presentism, just as ethnocentrism means we judge everybody by our culture standards, and if they don't meet our culture standards, they're terrible. We hate them. And now we have presentism. We're judging everybody in our culture by today's standards. And so if you made a joke in the 80s that is not appropriate for today, you could be in big trouble. And to go even further back, the people who wrote the U.S. Constitution, many of them had slaves. Therefore, we can't. I mean, obviously there are gradations, but I do think that we are in danger of losing that conservative insight that there is something to be gained by drawing on the past and having it evolve slowly. And this actually can bring us to something we haven't really talked about, which is globalization. We mentioned it briefly. There are those who think that our problems stem mostly from economic factors. To the extent that globalization matters, and it does matter in a lot of ways, I'd say one of the reasons it matters is because it led to so much change so quickly. And that has been deeply, deeply upsetting. Many of these changes, rationalization of production systems, allowing the work to go to where there's lower cost labor, all sorts of things that make sense to economists. If they simply had come in at half or a quarter the speed that they did, I think things would have gone much better. Now, of course, we would have given up on some economic growth, so I can't say that I wish that they had gone more slowly, but the social effects would have been quite digestible had they come in slowly. But because so many people were rendered obsolete, so much dislocation of jobs and factories and the usefulness of education. So I think globalization, with its very rapid changes, has certainly contributed to the sense of anomie. We don't know which way is up. Everything's falling apart. So again, the conservative concern for the speed of change, I think, is helpful.
Thank you for watching this episode. We appreciate your support. If you value vital conversations like this one, be sure to subscribe to the channel there and also click the notification bell to stay up to date with new releases.